Grammar Girl here. I'm Mignon Fogarty, your friendly guide to the English language. We talk about writing, history, rules, and other cool stuff. And today is episode 1000. And that just blows my mind. Back in April, I read that only 0.14% of podcasts have made it to 1000 episodes. So I felt like I should do something special. At first, I thought, 1000 episodes? Maybe I should take a day off. But that, my friends, is not how you get to 1000 episodes. So instead, I'm answering some of your questions, not about specific language topics, but about the show and bigger picture ideas about language. You can think of it like what happens when I give a radio interview. I've actually given hundreds of radio interviews over the years, but I'm sure most of you have never heard any of them. So, to get started, here's a good question from one of my Grammar Pelusians.
Hi, Grammar Girl. This is Jillian from Canada. First, I wanted to congratulate you on reaching 1,000 episodes and thank you for the many years of valuable information. Learning from you has significantly refined my writing and grammar. As a longtime Grammar Girl podcast listener, I'm curious about your origin story. Since you were an early adopter in the podcast space, what inspired you to start your podcast? Thank you for all that you do, and I look forward to many more episodes.
Thanks so much, Jillian, for the question and for supporting the show. And shout out to Canada. I did do a series of radio interviews on the CBC way back in 2009, but even if you did hear those, you've probably forgotten by now. And before I start, actually, I had to look up on my Wikipedia page that it was 2009, and wow, my Wikipedia page is woefully out of date. It has almost nothing I've done after about 2016. It doesn't have that I was on the Today Show. It doesn't have that I'm in the Podcast Hall of Fame. So much more. So if you're a big Wikipedia person and you're feeling bored or generous, maybe take a look at my page. I'd appreciate that. That'd be cool. Anyway, how did I get started? Well, before I was Grammar Girl, I was a freelance writer and editor. I have an undergraduate degree in English, but I also have a master's degree in biology from Stanford. So I specialized in health, science, and tech writing. And I did things like white papers, marketing materials, magazine articles, all kinds of stuff. But the work that paid the best, like writing manuals for DNA sequencers, was super boring. So as I got better and better at my business, I ended up being just bored and restless. And at that point, I had heard about this new thing called podcasting. So I decided to give it a try. And that was more than 18 years ago. And the first podcast I made was actually a science podcast called Absolute Science because podcast directories were alphabetical back then. So the name put it near the top of the list. And I loved doing it. I immediately started hearing from listeners, which is something you just didn't get back then, writing magazine articles. And I was learning things and I wasn't bored anymore. I mean, it was great. But between research and dealing with recording and editing interviews, which was a lot harder back then, it was also taking me 20 hours a week, which is an awful lot of time for a hobby. And when you're a freelancer, time really is money, and I just couldn't afford to keep doing it. But I had fallen in love with podcasting. So I looked around and thought, well, what else could I do? And I realized I was always looking up rules in the Chicago Manual of Style and the AP Style book and making little memory tricks for myself. And also my editing clients were making the same mistakes over and over again. So I thought people might enjoy fun little tips and find them useful. So I went to my local coffee shop, The Kind Grind on the beach in Santa Cruz, which sadly isn't there anymore. And I wrote down 3 ideas on a napkin. And oh, can I tell you how I wish I had kept that napkin. But since I was already set up for podcasting, I had 3 episodes out of Grammar Girl within a week. And it was much quicker to do the show because I didn't have to deal with all the problems of scheduling and recording interviews. And because the show was scripted, the audio editing also took a lot less time. So, yay, I could keep podcasting without going broke. And then the most amazing thing happened. Grammar Girl just shot up the charts at iTunes. I barely did anything to promote it, but I was hearing from tons of listeners, and people were telling all their friends and coworkers. And the show briefly went all the way to #1, and it just didn't stop growing. That first year was wild, just wild. And with a show that was so successful, I knew I had a business. And I launched Quick and Dirty Tips, the podcast network, and brought on people to do other podcasts in the same style: Money Girl, The Mighty Mommy, The Modern Manners Guy, and more. And then a few months later, the Wall Street Journal chose Grammar Girl as the web pick of the day. I was approached by 5 New York publishers, and I ended up doing a 3-book deal with Macmillan. I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and I partnered with Macmillan to grow the podcast network. I mean, like I said, it was quite a year. So that's how I got started. Thanks again for the question, Jillian.
Hi, this is Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid Podcast. I'd like to know, if Grammar Girl had never existed, what's a completely different podcast that you'd love to have done instead?
Thanks, Brian. Brian is a longtime podcaster too, and I believe he makes his podcast very much like I do, doing a lot of research and then writing a complete script, which is a pretty rare thing in the podcast world. Now, I probably would have been happy doing the science podcast if that had made sense at the time. But I do get ideas for other podcasts that I want to do all the time. So many ideas. But I'll tell you, the one thing that keeps coming back to me is everything penguins. I love penguins. I can't get enough of watching them waddle around. And sometimes when I'm sad, Pat will ask if I want to watch videos of penguins pushing each other off cliffs to cheer myself up. I want to travel the world interviewing penguin experts and meeting different kinds of penguins. Now, I imagine it would probably be a limited run because I'd run out of penguins and penguin experts, and it would certainly lose money. But, if we're just dreaming here, it is everything penguins. That's a completely different podcast I'd love to do if I had to do something besides Grammar Girl. And speaking of running out of topics, here's another question.
Hello, this is your old editor, Adam, calling from London, England. Here's my question. After releasing 1,000 episodes of Grammar Girl, how do you still come up with ideas for the podcast? Surely you have answered every question there is to know about grammar or language. How do you keep finding new things to talk about? Thank you.
Adam, it's so great to hear from you, and I hope you're enjoying your new life in London. And I'm definitely enjoying my subscription to your Nightwater newsletter. Now, when I started, I definitely thought I'd run out of topics before now. Part of what helped it keep going and stay interesting is that I've expanded the kind of thing I cover. In the early days, it was just tips on writing mechanics and commonly confused words. How to use commas, which versus that, and so on. But now I actually have a lot of shows about interesting word origins, like the recent show on words for walking, where we talked about traipse and perambulate. And I also like shows about groups of idioms, like all the idioms that include the word blue, blue moon, blue language, and so on. So that's given me a much bigger pool of topics to work with. And I still get new and interesting questions from listeners. It's amazing, but there really are just still things about this darn language that I haven't covered. But if you look at some of my favorite reference books, Garner's Modern English Usage and Merriam-Webster Dictionary of English Usage, they are thick. And the newest Garner's is more than 1,200 pages long with pretty small type. And then sometimes I realize it's been like 7 years since I did a show about semicolons, and there are a lot of new listeners who've never heard that topic before. So I'll spruce up an old episode. And often I don't realize it's been that long because I answer questions for people and I put together my LinkedIn Learning courses or my AP style webinars that cover these common topics. So it feels like I've talked about it a lot and don't realize that it's been so long since it's been in the podcast. And I think it's fine to update old topics. I rarely do straight reruns. I think I've maybe done, 4 or 5 the whole time when I was sick or something. I almost always add things to the episode, update things, and do a new recording because my audio setup is a lot better than it used to be. And I love it when I'm able to put a new spin on an old topic, like back in February in episode 968, when the title of Taylor Swift's new album, The Tortured Poets Department, gave me a new way to talk about apostrophes in more common phrases like farmer's market and Veterans Day. I love that. So that's how I do it. And I guess if I think about it, maybe if I could make it work for grammar, maybe there's hope for everything penguins.
Hi, Mignon. It's Rob Reinalda. Again, congratulations on this great milestone. I have 2 questions for you, and you can choose one or the other or both or neither. First, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently in the early days of the Grammar Girl podcast?
Thanks so much, Rob. Rob is a freelance editor I met years ago when he worked at Reagan Communications, and we've become friends over time. And he even did some guest writing for the podcast, so you may recognize his name if you're a longtime listener. And he's also the winner of the Aces Robinson Prize for editing. So, what do I wish I had done differently? Well, these days, I guess what's on my mind is that I really wish I had started doing a regular interview episode sooner. I love doing them. And from everything I can see, all of you really like them too. And they are so much easier to do than they were in the early days of podcasting when I was really struggling with my early science podcast. But let's see, the early days. I guess knowing what I know now, I would have asked for more help sooner. It took me years to hire an assistant, and I only did it after Stever Robbins, who was the host of the Get It Done Guy productivity podcast, really badgered me into doing it. Stever's really smart. If you ever have the chance to take his advice, you should. And even with these interview podcasts, I'm only able to do them because of the extra help I'm getting from the people on the Quick and Dirty Tips team. And I could have pushed to get more help years ago, but I'm not really a pusher, but I should have been. Yeah, so if anyone listening is starting a business, get help so you can grow faster. Don't try to do everything yourself. I'm still kind of bad about that. And someone else also asked Rob's second question, so I'm going to move on, but don't think I'm cutting him off.
Hey, Grammar Girl, it's David H. Lawrence the 17th, and I'm wondering what the most fascinating 1 or 2 ideas or concepts or things you didn't know about grammar that you found out by doing your podcast.
Thanks, David. For those of you who don't remember, David H. Lawrence the 17th is teaching the audiobook narration course I'm taking right now, which I love. By the way, I'm having so much fun. Still struggling to write my Hardy Boys adaptation, but at least I have some accountability now, so I'm making progress. And David is also an actor, so if you see him on video or something, you might recognize him. He played Eric Doyle, the puppet master on the TV show Heroes. So I have learned so many interesting things. That's one of the things I love about making the podcast. I remember one thing that just blew my mind very early on was learning that people spoke French in England for like 200 years. And that's where we got so many of the words derived from French in English. I mean, not all of them, but a lot, like the words for government and cooking. When the Duke of Normandy conquered England in 1066, earning the name William the Conqueror, he brought Norman French to the island. And I just couldn't believe I didn't know that. I was an English major, but I had never learned anything about the history of the language. And apparently not much about the history of England either. And because I was so surprised, 1066 is one of the only years I remember as having historical significance. I mean, 1776, 1066. And I can't think of any others where if you just said the year, I'd instantly know what you mean. And when I visited London a few years ago, we went to the White Tower, and I got really excited when I saw a bust of William the Conqueror. Like, I pulled Pat over, and I was like, that's him. He's why we have so many words from French. Let's see. And I think the other really transformative thing I learned that's more of a concept that happened over time is realizing that what I thought of as hard and fast rules, almost all of them were different in the past. Writers used way more commas in the 1800s. Nouns were capitalized in the Constitution, the US Constitution. And our grandparents said they were graduated from high school instead of they graduated from high school or graduated high school. We exist at just a point in time for our language, and it changed before, and it'll change again. And that doesn't mean we should just abandon all the rules and nobody needs editors anymore. But I also don't get too emotionally attached to rules either. Thanks, David. And here's another interesting question that's kind of related. I don't have a recording, but Wonder Dog on Mastodon asked how I chose the quote, 2 friends I use as examples in the pod and the book. Well, those 2 friends are 2 buddies, Squiggly, the bumbling yellow snail who loves chocolate, and Aardvark, a grumpy aardvark who loves fishing. When I created the podcast, I knew I wanted it to be fun and friendly and funny, as well as educational. So I wanted silly cartoon friends to use over and over in example sentences. I actually imagined building a story about them as the episodes went on, which I haven't done, but I do think sometimes about writing a children's book about Squiggly and Aardvark going on adventures. So in my mind, they were kind of like Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street or Felix and Oscar from The Odd Couple. I took some classes at UC Santa Cruz, and Squiggly is definitely modeled on Sammy, the UC Santa Cruz banana slug mascot. Aardvark is more of a mystery. I don't know. He just popped into my head. But the reason it's related to the last question is that a few years into the podcast, I learned that the names Squiggly and Aardvark are inherently funny because certain words just do sound funny. Kevin Cummings wrote a piece about comedy writing for me, and that's when I learned that words with Q sounds and K sounds are known by comedians to be funny. Apparently, a kidney is funnier in a punchline than a pancreas. So maybe that's why I thought Aardvark was a good name to go with Squiggly. I'm going to play the next 2 questions together because they're kind of related.
Jan, it's Roy Peter Clark. How do you help writers distinguish between grammar as a rule and grammar as a tool? That is, between conventional grammar and what is sometimes called rhetorical grammar. Keep doing your wonderful work.
My question is, do you think conversations are hindered by the extensive rules of English grammar?
First, thanks to both of you. And first, I don't really think conversations are hindered by grammar rules because I think most people ignore the rules when they're having conversations. I've transcribed a lot of interviews in my life, and I can tell you most people definitely don't speak proper grammar. And that's actually another reason my show is normally scripted. I don't speak perfectly off the cuff, and people expect a show about grammar to have perfect language. So the only way to make that happen is with a script. People don't even speak in complete sentences, let alone with proper grammar. And it's why you often hear advice not to use proper grammar in the dialogue in fiction, because if you do, your characters won't sound natural. But I will say that writing can be hindered by getting too caught up in the rules of grammar. When I first started writing Grammar Girl, I absolutely noticed that my writing got worse. It stopped flowing because I was so conscious of my grammar. It kept me from writing the way I always had, and I had been a good writer. I was a good writer. But I started second guessing every construction, every comma, and, it messed me up for a while. So I always tell people to just write a first draft without thinking about the grammar, and then fix all the problems later in editing. And learn grammar rules over time so you create fewer problems, but don't get hung up on it while you're trying to be creative. And to Roy's question, I started out teaching conventional grammar, stuff like punctuation and subject-verb agreement. I've added in rhetorical grammar, which, is stuff like how your writing affects your tone or your persuasiveness. There's some overlap, like in the recent article where I talked about how to use commas, parentheses, and dashes, which have mechanical elements, but which one you choose also changes the tone of your sentence. Well, conventional grammar is a bunch of rules that come with this sense of right and wrong that can cause some people to stress out. Rhetorical grammar is a tool you can choose to use to actually enhance your conversations or writing. And the difference isn't really something I point out a lot, but, maybe I should. I'll make a note of it. Your books do that really well, Roy. Roy Peter Clark is an incredibly accomplished writing teacher with a bunch of great books. And this question is making me think of the interview with Roy back in 2023 in episode 923, where he talked about his book, Tell It Like It Is, which is about writing with what he calls civic clarity, which gets more deep into that rhetorical side of grammar. Thanks, Roy.
Hello, my friend. This is C.C. Chapman. Congratulations on your 1000th episode. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy to call you a friend. That makes me so happy. I got a question for you. You want a question? I'm just curious, even with all the knowledge you have and all the knowledge you share, what's like the mistake you make all the time still? I know we all have those quirks where we type a word wrong, we know how to spell it, or a grammar mistake. I'm just curious, what mistake do you make all the time after all these years? Take care. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much, Cece. I met Cece so many years ago, I can't even remember when it was. It was definitely at some podcasting conference because Cece was also a podcaster in the very early days. He is now a business professor at Wheaton College and the co-author of the best-selling book Content Rules. And that is such a great question because I definitely mess things up. A couple of days ago, I looked up my own chart on how to conjugate lay versus lie. And my darn fingers, will still sometimes maddeningly type IT' when I know darn well the right word shouldn't have an apostrophe. I know that, obviously. I'm especially proud of a memory trick I came up with for how to spell bureaucracy back in 2019 in episode 662. Because until then, I don't think I ever got it right the first time. And since then, I get it right every time. The short version is that it involves a burro putting on perfume. The burro gives you the B-U-R part, and the perfume gives you the E-A-U part. Sometimes I feel like if that's all people ever get from me, I will have made the world a better place because I know so many people who are like me and can't spell that word. And I love this question because I think it's important for people to know that everyone makes mistakes. In the very early days of the podcast, part of my sign-off included the line, "I don't claim to be perfect." And Pat talked me into taking it out because he said I was undermining my credibility. But it's still my vibe. I know a lot more now than I knew when I started, but I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Just do your best. Look things up when you don't know them, make up silly memory tricks, and keep trying. Thanks, Cece. And finally, I'll end with not a question, but just a nice message.
Mignon, Michael Sheehy calling. Just wanted to congratulate you on your 1000th podcast and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Michael. I met Michael years ago when he came to one of my book signings, and we've followed each other on social media ever since. And I have to say, I have loved meeting all the people who've come out for my events like that. I haven't done any in a long time, but I have the best memories of the ones I did. So thank you, Michael, for sticking with me all these years. And thank you, everyone, because I wouldn't have gotten to 1,000 episodes without all of you who listen. Because of you, I get to do this thing I love, and I couldn't be more grateful. So I'll be back next week for episode 1001. And just some quick administrative stuff before I go. Thanks to the many people at Macmillan, Quick and Dirty Tips, who have worked on Grammar Girl over the years, and to the current team, Holly Hutchings, Davina Tomlin, Morgan Christensen, Brandon Getchus, and Nathan Sams. Thanks to the Grammar Pelusians who support this show and get fun text messages from me every week. And since it's my mission this summer, if you are an educator, check out my LinkedIn Learning writing courses to use in your classes this fall. They're free through many university libraries. Free. Use them. And that, my friends, is all. Thanks for listening.